Today, I'm taking on a bit of a challenge. I'm gonna make this rocking chair, but not only am I gonna make this rocking chair, I'm gonna make it for free out of one pallet. I've seen the videos of people claiming you can make a bunch of money by using free pallets from Facebook Marketplace or just local businesses, but I wanna see how realistic it is to actually use this wood to build something somewhat decent. I'm going to show you the entire process of tearing it apart and building it back up into my new rocking chair. So with that, let's get started. The first thing I did was look around the warehouse for any pallets laying around, and then I realized I hit the jackpot. There were plenty of pallets here to choose from, and since I really only needed one, the owners didn't mind. I do want to mention to make sure to check the stamps on pallets to make sure they're okay to use, because some have bad chemicals that you do not want to be inhaling. If you see an HT, that means it's heat treated, so it's all good to use. There's other markings and I'm no expert, so definitely do your own research on this, but for the most part, HT or KD is good from what I understand. I put on these old gardening gloves that I found just to use when handling this stuff, which probably wasn't necessary, but I found them the other day anyway and wanted to use them for something. So after looking around for a little, I found one hidden in the corner that I liked. Now this definitely wasn't a perfect pallet, but to be honest, I didn't even really know what I was looking for. I just found this light one, most likely just made out of pine or some softwood that most people will probably find. Now I tried a few different methods of taking this apart, and using a hammer and a crowbar worked if the top and bottom parts were aligned. But if not, I would just take a hammer and try to hit it directly off. I put the pallet on these sawhorses to make things easier, and then I just cut to the good parts when the slats actually came off, but just know that this part takes a little longer than you'd think. Or I was just doing something wrong, that could have been the problem. You might notice that at some points the wood splits or breaks, but for these slats, I only need 20 inches that are going to be good to use, so I'm not too worried about little parts of it not being perfect. So anyway, if you wanted to know how to make a complete mess with a pallet, well now you know, because this is what it looked like when I was done tearing it apart. But then I organized it, because now I have to take out all the nails. For this, I just used a bolt cutter to make the nails shorter, and then I hammered them straight through. I will say this part was kind of satisfying to do, but it's a little tedious to watch, so I'll speed this part up. Now that the pallet was fully taken apart, it was time to move the pieces and get them planed. But before I do that, I took measurements on some chairs nearby so that I could base my measurements around those. I don't have one of those big fancy planers that you can just put the wood through, so instead I used my electric hand planer to take off the top layer of the pieces. In case you were wondering what the point of this is, here's a little before and after of this part. This one made a pretty big mess too. I wrote out all of the measurements on this card that you might see me referencing, but in case you don't like my handwriting, I typed it if you do want to pause and see my exact measurements. I also made a 3D model in SketchUp to help me visualize and measure before making cuts. So I just measured everything out and made marks with my pencil and cut it to length with the miter saw. These long marks I'm drawing are going to be for the table saw once I cut it all to the correct length.
Bring it down.
I tried to find good 20-inch sections of the slats to make cuts to use. So these are the pieces that are going to make up the seat and the backrest. So with those measurements and cuts from before, I cut all the pieces to width. I realized that to make the rockers work, I would have to combine 3 scrap pieces to make the second rocker, so I tried to glue and screw them together, and well, you'll see later if that worked out. In the meantime though, I was just spreading on the glue with my finger when everything collapsed.
What the?
I mean literally, the table legs gave out and everything fell. In the moment, I was pretty pissed to be honest, but looking back, it's kind of funny. Sometimes you just gotta laugh it off, but I was really not in the mood. I am now though, so it's pretty funny. Anyway, I called it a day, and the next morning I got started sanding pretty much everything down so that it would be ready to get stained. Here's a quick update of what the garage looks like at this point. Yeah, it's rough, I know, but I promise all these random looking pieces of wood are going to turn into a chair very soon. So I got out my giant TV piece of cardboard, which by the way, if you bought a TV recently, this makes for a great thing to paint over so that you don't mess everywhere. Then I just got all the pieces of wood out and got them ready to paint. For the stain, I'm using the last of what I have left of this dark walnut stain and spar, and I'll be putting a couple coats on to make sure the wood stays sealed in case this chair ends up being outside. I also just like the look of this stain. It's going to give the chair a nice rustic kind of vibe. Then I went over it again for the second and third coats. So after that, this is what I was left with. Now it's time to assemble it. First, I wanted to connect the two 20-inch pieces in the front to the two 42-inch pieces in the back using support pieces that I cut to have 2 of them be 20 inches long and 2 of them be 16 inches long. Then I marked how high I wanted the support pieces to be connected to the main ones, which was around 8 inches high for all of them, but I made sure to have the front pieces be lower than the side ones so that the screws didn't hit each other at any point. To connect all of the pieces for this chair, I drilled pilot holes and screwed them together with either 2.5 inch or 1.25 inch wood screws depending on how thick the pieces were that I was fastening together.
Now we have this.
So I fastened the 16-inch support pieces together for each side of the chair and then screwed those two together using those 20-inch support pieces. It definitely helps to have someone helping you hold these up while screwing because it's a little awkward to do by yourself. I measured up 1 foot because that's where I want the seat to be, but before I put in the slats, I have to put in these thin 17.5 inch side pieces to hold them. Then I'll be able to screw the slats down from the top so that they can be fastened to and rest on these. So this is what it looks like so far. It's finally starting to take shape and it's going to be done soon. I took 2 20-inch slats and put them in the front and back, also to hold the slats that will make up the seat. The pilot holes were really important on this build because this wood I'm using is cheap softwood that used to be on a pallet and it splits really easily. I also wanted to make this out of more of a commonly found pallet with this type of softwood because I'm sick of seeing people on YouTube finding these crazy fancy hardwoods that just so happen to be in pallets on the side of the street. Anyways, I took 4 of my 20-inch slats and played around with placement until I was happy with how it looked. Then I screwed it all together.
Okay, it stays.
Next, I'm screwing in the armrests, which are these thin 18-inch long pieces, and I'm just placing them right over the main front beams. Finally, we're getting to the backrest. For this, I decided it'd be best to assemble it mostly on its own, making sure everything is evenly spaced. So I just marked it and then drilled pilot holes and screwed it all together. So I marked 4 inches up from the seat and screwed this in from the sides. Then I took the other 20-inch piece and fastened it together, joining all 3 slats and the 2 tall beams. I found it best to line it up, mark where I needed to screw, then drill the pilot holes and start the screws before trying to attach it all together.
Well.
So, after a quick test, it was finally time to add those rockers to make this go from a chair to a rocking chair. I marked where the middle was so I knew where to make it dip, and then I kind of just freehanded a curve that I could cut with my jigsaw, and it'll leave me with a curved piece of wood that I could then duplicate and fasten to the bottom of the chair. I sanded it down and then traced it onto the other piece to cut again and create a copy. Sure enough, where I tried to glue and screw it together, it didn't exactly work out. I still cut it out and ended up screwing it to the bottom like I did with the other side, but I plan to just replace it later. I put a cushion on it from a different chair, and even though it doesn't really fit perfectly, it makes it really comfortable. With that said, I'd say overall this was a successful build. It definitely had its flaws and it wasn't the smoothest project, but I definitely learned a lot and I'm glad I was able to actually try working with pallets to see if it was a realistic thing to do. Ultimately, it's probably not really worth it to spend all that extra time just to get some free wood that isn't that expensive to begin with, but it's definitely a fun challenge and good way to get some practice with woodworking if you're just starting out and don't have much money. Well, I hope you learned a little and enjoyed this one because it was pretty interesting and time consuming to make. Until next time, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.